As we reach the end of this, the fourth year since many of us really woke up to what is going on in the world, and the forces tugging at the puppet strings from the shadowy reaches of the Swiss Alps and other rarefied enclaves of neoliberal globalism, I wanted to reflect on how far we've come. Many high-profile commentators, notably Tim Pool, have spent much of the past year declaring adamantly that we are winning, that more and more people are waking up to the gross abuses of our ruling elite and shunning their previously held faith in the system. It seems the white pill attitude has certainly gained ascendance over the black pill disposition of late. Though I, for one, having had my head largely out of the daily news for the past few months due to sudden and difficult life upheavals, feel ill-qualified to deliver the appropriate analysis on this point. I will, however, say that I have detected a shift in the wind. And 3 small interactions in my own life these past few weeks reinforce this feeling. I'll relate these to you momentarily, but first I'd like to quote James Lindsay from an address he recently gave titled "How to Stop a Cultural Revolution," linked in the description. In summing up his 2-hour talk, Lindsay stressed the importance of being a landing pad for people who are coming gradually unstuck from the matrix, or the machine, or the woke cult, or whatever moniker we may wish to give the neo-Marxist, Maoist malaise that has been engulfing our institutions and our society for at least the past decade, and is seeking, through supranational corporate partnership, to implement a monolithic system of world government. You can jump into James's talk at 1 hour and 56 minutes to catch his closing remarks, but if you have time, I do recommend listening to the whole address, for it is, as always, outstanding and on point. Lindsay says, "Be a landing pad. Woke is a cult. The people who are really involved are in deep, and deprogramming them is hard. You need to be a landing pad. You probably are not going to shake many people too often out of being woke, especially in the moment. It's not easy. It's cult deprogramming. You can, on the other hand, make sure that they know where you stand and that you are there for them any time they shake loose. Be a landing pad. You want to be the person to whom they will send the thing that they say, 'This doesn't make sense to me. Can you please explain it?' And you want to have the explanation ready and say, 'Yeah, it's like this other thing.' When they start to see that they were lied to, they start to red pill. They start to break free of the cult. You become a resource to these people. You help them out of the wizard's circle to pull them back to reality. And it's so important with family that you keep this in mind. Remember that Maoism was designed to tear apart families. Fortunately for me, my family are all more or less on the same page as me. My brother and I have been aligned in our thinking since around 2017. My parents took a little while longer to identify the source of the shadows on the wall of the cave, but they too are what I would now call red-pilled. I have, however, recently found myself in precisely the position that Lindsay advocates for with a close friend. I have become his landing pad. Funnily enough, his journey down the rabbit hole began with the Israel-Gaza situation, and a fellow who'd hitherto been largely apolitical and content to simply work, hit the gym, make music and party with his mates on the weekend, suddenly became an activist. Not my kind of activist, mind you. As I've previously stated, I see the Israel-Gaza thing as yet another distraction, an engineered conflict to ensure money continues flowing into the war machine from the pockets of the taxpayers, and a horrific spectacle to avert our eyes from the larger crimes being perpetrated against the people of our planet. But once the machine activates someone, there's never any telling where that new awareness will take them. Mess around with someone's sense of calm and normality, and you're liable to send them off down all sorts of winding paths that your propaganda is helpless to forestall. Recently, having become a father, my friend was shocked and enraged at the images of maimed children coming out of Gaza, and quickly found himself mired in the endless loops of TikTok and Instagram reels depicting the horror. But he wanted to know more. He wanted to know why it was all happening, and why some of the pieces didn't add up. So he turned to the one person he knew who had spent many years with his head stuck in politics. Me. I didn't attempt to steer him in any particular direction, but I told him my views and invited him to consider who ultimately benefits from conflicts like this. It wasn't long before he was asking me questions about the global monetary system, his words virtually echoing those of James Lindsay. "This doesn't make sense to me. Can you please explain it?" I pointed him to the creature from Jekyll Island, and his journey down the rabbit hole continued. The next thing you know, he's following Vivek Ramaswamy and other renegades, and beginning to untangle the global corporate superstructure which funds and perpetuates the forever wars. Then, just the other day, he sent me this clip of Julian Assange discussing the true nature of the Afghanistan war.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security event. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful.
I've screen grabbed our ensuing exchange. My friend literally opens with Lindsay's words, "This doesn't make sense to me." And in his question, "Do you know about this idea?" he is implicitly asking, "Can you please explain it?" He is asking me this because I am a landing pad for him. If you read our whole exchange, you'll see he very quickly equates Assange's hypothesis to Ukraine and Gaza, and, I might add, even as the avowed atheist he is, to satanic evil. And thus the fire rises, the ripples expand, and one person, acting as a landing pad for the next, facilitates the Great Awakening. My friend is now engaged in a slow process of educating himself and becoming that landing pad for others. I stopped believing in complete coincidence some time ago, and I do not find it coincidental at all that mere hours after I finished listening to Lindsay's talk, which closed with the call to be a landing pad for those asking the question, "This doesn't make sense to me, can you please explain it?" that my friend contacted me with that Assange clip and said, "Do you know about this idea? It doesn't make sense to me." God is working through all of us, even those, like my friend, who do not believe in him. And my point with this little anecdote is simply to illustrate how regular people like you and me can change things, and are changing things, slowly, day by day. There are two more recent examples of the awakening that I've experienced in the past few weeks, which I'd like to briefly share before closing. A friend of mine in Germany recently contacted me, asking about the 14-year-old daughter of a mutual friend back in New Zealand, who was, early last year, right around the time New Zealand's program was reaching its completion, diagnosed with an exceedingly rare and rampantly aggressive type of brain tumour, or what Dr. Ryan Cole and others have termed turbo cancer, a new and widespread phenomenon not seen prior to the rollout. A triple friend of mine in his early 40s also recently passed away from turbo cancer. Diagnosis to death in 6 weeks. My friend in Germany wanted to know what I thought about the case of the daughter of our mutual friend and her sudden and alarming stage 4 cancer. I was hesitant to tell her what I thought. For one, because I have no hard proof, but moreover, because the last time I spoke to my friend in Germany about the back in 2021, she was all on board with it. Not thrilled, but not concerned either, and indeed pushy in her inquiries as to why I was refusing to take the shot. But I forged ahead anyway and told her I believed our mutual friend's daughter had induced turbo cancer. I was surprised to find her open and indeed keen to discuss my assertion further, and our conversation went on to the topic of myocarditis, a more common side effect, now well documented, which she agreed has also affected a few people she knows back home in Germany. The fire rises. My final anecdote is somewhat less profound, but somewhat more amusing and a good way to close. In the final week of the working year, I was on a Teams meeting with a few colleagues, and one of them mentioned they were working from home that day because they'd had a positive COVID test, and the conversation quickly morphed into a general satire of COVID and all its permutations. "When do you fly home for Christmas?" one colleague asked the person. "Not until next Friday," they said. "Well, your next rat test should be showing all clear by then," my boss said. "It doesn't matter anyway," one of the other people on the call said. "You can fly with COVID now. There are no restrictions at all." To this there was a collective chortle of irony, and then my boss, an upstanding mid-senior scion of the corporate establishment, said, with thick sarcasm, "That's right, the last 3 years never happened." I have no way of telling my boss's thoughts on COVID, the vaccines, and that whole ludicrous saga. He may well have been just as sceptical as me from the start. But it struck me as significant that a senior manager at his level, a man who has risen not only by dint of his own considerable talent, but inevitably, for there is no other way in the machine, by playing the game, that a man at his level should be so openly mocking of the whole thing, especially as he is new to the company. It is a small and amusing little slice of the new normal. Almost 4 years on, and the noises coming from regular folk suggest to me that many of them won't be fooled again, that they have adopted a new outlook, a healthy distrust, and the sardonic scepticism toward power elites that is necessary in a plurality of the population to bring about systemic change. They suggest to me that perhaps Tim Pool is right. Perhaps we are winning. "The last 3 years never happened," said my boss. I feel like what he really meant was, "Oh, they happened all right, but the bastards in charge want to gaslight us into thinking that they didn't." Thanks for listening. And thanks also to everyone who's been following along for the past year or two, or for however long you've been here. This will be my last video for 2023. I'll be taking 3 or 4 weeks off, and I'll get back at it in the new year. The past few months have been a bit rough for me, and I apologise that my content hasn't been coming out as regularly as it used to. There's been a lot going on in my head. I've been trying to get some things straight, and inevitably, when your life gets disrupted, so too does your workflow and your output. But I want to thank you all who've stuck around with this channel and continued listening and checking out my stuff from week to week or from fortnight to fortnight as my content flow has slackened off a bit. I want to assure you I will be back in 2024 and attempting to return my output to its old once weekly schedule. In the meantime, I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a safe and happy New Year. Take care out there, and I'll see you all soon.